Are you poor because you don't have money, or you don't have money because you're poor? This is a question that I need you to ask yourself. And the answer determines if you've got what we call a scarcity mindset or an abundance mindset. If you're like most people that I know, you are born in a poor family. And poverty teaches you some of the worst lessons in life that hold you back from becoming a rich person when you're older. How often do you find that you're trying to make money or to solve your money problems by working harder, getting more certification, or thinking that by doing more things that your financial state is going to change? But year after year, you find that there is a very big gap between what your aspirations are and where the reality of your life is. Now, what I need us to do in this session is I need us to look at the things that most of us that come from very humble beginnings, things that nobody ever tells us that are holding us back. Because being poor is not just lack of money. There is more to that than what anybody ever dare tells us. So this session, I want to call it deconstructing the scarcity mindset loop. Deconstructing the scarcity mindset. Deconstructing the scarcity mindset feedback loop. There are things that I need us to look at that we never think of. Now, the first thing that you have to understand, there is what we call your biological hardware. And when we look at this biological hardware, I'm looking at your brain. Your brain has got two parts that are very interesting when it comes to wealth creation. The first part is what we call the amygdala. That's what we call the primitive brain. This is, if you are born in a poor environment, this is the part of brain that you consistently keep on developing because you're consistently reacting to everything that is going on in your life. You're consistently reacting to scarcity. There's always lack of food. There's always you have to pay rent. You have to pay school fees. You're running out of money. You need to pay electricity. Now, that part becomes so developed that as you grow up, you become more reactive rather than responsive to life. When you make money, all you're trying to do is always fill up the gaps that have opened up in your life. And as you grow up, you'll find those gaps become so big because consistently you have to keep on making money to pay these bills. Now, the other part is what we call the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain that is responsible for long-term planning. This is the part of your brain that brings in delayed gratification. This is a part of your brain that impresses your vision. You can use it to see what kind of future that you want and then impress it. But the unfortunate part here is rich people, people that are born in very stable environments, people that don't have to fight over these little things, they develop that part of their brain. As a poor person, the amygdala, which is the reptile, the primitive part of your brain, is the biggest part of your brain. And that is, if I had to draw a brain here, this will be your amygdala here. And if I had to use proper pen here, I'll say this is red. Amygdala, this is red, and this prefrontal cortex is green. So there's a very big difference when it comes to that. For you to make money, you need long-term planning. You need to delay gratification. So poor people, people that come from poor scarcity mindset backgrounds, we start living our lives like a sprinter rather than a marathon runner. Wealth, unfortunately, wealth is a marathon. Creating wealth is a marathon. And survival is a sprint. So you can see now where that problem comes in. You cannot run a marathon if you have a sprinter's gas tank. You're going to gas out. And this is one thing that most of us don't understand, and nobody teaches us. How do we rewire ourselves biologically? Because your biological wiring is off. The second thing here is what we call the bandwidth tax. A poor person and a rich person make very many different decisions on a daily basis. We have what we call decision fatigue. You know, a scarcity mindset forces you, or a poor background forces you to make so many decisions from the very first thing that you wake up in the morning. You have to choose if you're going to eat breakfast or not. You have to choose between breakfast and lunch. You have to choose between lunch and dinner. You have to choose if you're going to wake up early to walk to work, or you're going to take a bus or going to take a taxi. You have to choose if you're going to shower cold water so that you can save electricity bills. There's so many decisions that you make that by the time you get to work, you're suffering from what we call decision fatigue. You cannot think straight. So when it comes to you working, somebody that these things are already automated, this person is automated all these things because of the systems they have in their lives. So if you are RAM, you find that as a computer, your RAM is completely depleted because of all this chaos. Poverty creates so many chaos in your life that on a consistent level, you have to keep on trying to solve. So think of your life as a battery. And if this is a battery here, this one here is full and here is empty. A rich person, or a person that comes from a rich family or a rich background, by the time they get to work, their battery is still full. So they have the ability, they have the capacity, they have the bandwidth to make big decisions because they can. On the other hand, a poor rich person that is struggling to pay daily bills, by the time they get to work, they've already gotten there. Now you can see how even in terms of progress professionally, in an environment, an office environment, how this is going to change your placing. And we have to understand here that wealth creation is not a character issue. It is lack of bandwidth. Until you can create systems and understand that this is one thing that is holding you back, you are going to struggle to make money going forward. And then we have to look at the third thing here. These are things that nobody tells us. As a poor person, we suffer from what we call the fixed pie fallacy. Fixed pie fallacy. What do I mean by that? Think of yourself. When was the first time you were exposed to money in your family? And who exposed you to money? If I remember correctly, it was my father. And any time I saw money or there was any discussion of money in the house, it's when my father was giving money to my mom to be used for a specific function. It could be to go buy food, to go buy for us clothing, to go, something has to be paid. And it was a certain amount of money. If it's $20, if it's $100, he will always give exactly the amount of money that is going to cost that. And in my mindset over time, money becomes a zero-sum kind of survival attitude in your life. You use every single kind of money. Whatever coin comes in, it has to go out because it matches your bills. And you remember correctly, if I remember correctly, even before he earns the money, the bills were already piling. So the money comes in and we just become transit. We just become a vessel that the money goes through us. We were like, more or less like a sieve. The money comes from there, goes through us, and goes back up. We never kept that money. And that becomes a mindset that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I have to avoid making or working hard just to pay bills, because that is the sure way of consistently staying poor. On the other hand, as I'm looking at money as a zero-sum kind of survival attitude, my rich friends playing not to lose. Remember, I'm playing to pay bills, but my rich friends are playing purely not to lose. Now, these are totally two different mindsets. A poor person, you become what I call hyper-loss aversion. What you're doing here is you're consistently avoiding not to lose money, because you consistently the money just goes through you, and whatever comes in fits exactly what needs to be paid for. A rich person does not play to lose. He plays to multiply that money. And the psychology around money when it comes to this way of thinking completely changes how you think. And these are things that unfortunately nobody tells us. These are things that we end up learning only when we get older. Risk is a calculation that only the rich can take. And for us poor people, unfortunately, we can't, because we look at it as a threat. You've always lived a way where if you don't pay that bill, the consequences are just too dire. If you don't pay that bill, it means electricity is going to be cut off. If you don't have that money, it means you have to walk to work. If you don't buy that mealie meal, it means that you're not going to have food for the entire month or for the entire week. And this changes our mindset completely. The other thing that nobody tells us here is there is what we call the poverty tax. There's what we call the poverty tax. It's expensive to be poor. It's very, very expensive to be poor. Because if you're a poor person, you're always thinking of saving money. You're always thinking of not losing money. And if you're thinking of losing money, it means most of your transactions are always going for the cheapest things that always ends up costing you more. So, for example, you need shoes to go to work, and you use your feet a lot, you walk a lot. Technically, you need to go for the best shoes, because your usage of these shoes is like a rich person that buys a BMW because he uses the car consistently. But because you don't have enough money in this instant, you go for the cheapest Hong Kong shoes. These shoes cost you 500 rands, while a good quality pair of shoes will cost you 3,000 rands. So you think in the meantime that you've saved money, but after 1 week, that shoe comes loose. Your feet are hurting, everything now. You have to repair, or you have to either repair or replace that shoe 3 times more than the rich person that went to buy the shoe that cost them 3,000, and he can only replace that shoe after 1,000 kilometers or 2-3 years. So the premium for poverty, it's very, very expensive, that none of us ever understand, or nobody ever tells us how that works. Liquidity buys you time and durability. When you have money, you invest in few things that last you long, and it saves you a lot of money going forward for you repairing these things or buying new ones. While on the other side, poverty makes you pay premium, because you have to replace the same water kettle 3 times in a year because you went for the cheapest one. And these are things that hold us back consistently. The other thing here is what I call the invisible capital. invisible capital. Being born in a poor background, you only look at wealth as money, moolah, ching ching. But there is more to money than just financial. We have to look beyond financial. We have to start looking at the social and the cultural assets that keep the rich far ahead and consistently making money. The first one we have to look at here, of course, is what we call social capital. A rich person can lose everything today, but he can be able to make more, that same amount of money or more in 1 year, because of the relationships he's built. He's built what we call an ecosystem. Social capital is so high for them that he knows who to call, what, to lean on them, call them up, and of course, build up on his idea. And then we have what we call the cultural capital. Cultural capital is, there is a way that the rich people behave. There is a way that rich people talk. There is a talk for rich people. There is a way that rich people dress. There is a way that rich people eat. There is a way that rich people hold a fork. There is a way that rich people chew their food. There is a way that rich people sit in a certain posture. Now, all these are what we call cultural capital. When you go into this environment and you don't understand these things, you start suffering from what I call the imposter syndrome. You don't fit. And in not fitting, you stand out like a sore thumb. Chances are when they won't invite you next time because you disrupt the whole setup. And secondly, even if they invite you, you're not going to go because you don't feel like you fit in. These are things that we need to be taught. These are things that, coming from a poor background, I've had to learn. Going to these places, once in a while going to expensive restaurants, and just apart from the food, is watching how people behave, how they talk to the waiters, how they talk to each other, how they carry themselves, how they chew, the order in which they order food in. All these are very, very big things that if you don't understand them, they will affect you making money. Money might get you in the door, but social and cultural capital will keep you in the room. And these are things that we need to understand. The other thing here, number 6, is debt. It's what I call the identity anchor. The identity anchor. Poor people, we're afraid of debt because we have what we call the kinship tax. Some people call it the black tax, the family tax. For me to be where I am, so many other people had to sacrifice. They had, in Kenya, we have what we call Harambe. It's Ubuntu in places like South Africa here, where all of a sudden, the whole community, the whole family, the whole village comes together. If you have to go to university, people have to chip in. This one brings a chicken, this one brings in a goat, this one brings in a sack of maize. They sell all this collectively, and you have to use it as school fees going to school. Now, over time, as you start making money, automatically it is your moral and ethical responsibility to give back. But this is one of the biggest things that all of a sudden now, you have no way, you have no foot to stand on for you to say that I'm going to isolate myself for this given time so that I can build up this kraal. I can build up this kitty so that I can be able to lift as many people as I can. No. Straight away, you coming from university, you are a student, you still have students' loans, you've just gotten your first job, you have things to pay, but you have tax that you have to pay home. And this consistently is one of the biggest things that keeps poor people poor, because we have to do that. This leads to what I call self-sabotage. you'll find it very hard. I'll find it very hard for me to shun off my family, to be able to eat 3 meals a day, drive a nice car, live in a beautiful house, while I know my siblings are struggling. And these are some of the things that we bear, things that we have to carry from coming from a generation of intergenerational poverty. Situational poverty is different, where people are doing well and because of medical emergencies or somebody loses a job and people go through very hard times. That is totally different. But I'm talking about intergenerational poverty, where we're coming from a place where we've struggled all our life. Now, these things teach us bad manners going forward that it becomes very hard for us to be able to change. Because we inherit the wrong things in life. Now, poverty teaches you some of the worst things that you can ever accept. We accept bad treatment. A poor person will accept to be treated like a piece of shit at work with the boss and all those things because you think, I have no other way out. Poverty is a horrible teacher. Poverty teaches you all of a sudden where you say that I'm grateful. Gratitude does not necessarily mean that you have to accept the shit life that you're living. Gratitude means that I still have to strive for better life. I have to look at where I am. I cannot embrace what is happening that is shit and settle and say this is my lot in life. But the unfortunate thing is that that is what poverty teaches most of us that have come from that kind of environment. So which of these 6 points do you resonate with? Which one do you disagree with? Which one do you find that you need to work on? Share this with me. Comment right up in the comment section. Let's see. If you have a friend that is struggling with this, remember to share. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, do the right thing. God bless and see you soon.